The ultimate 5 best handhelds for retro gaming on the go. So, as you all know, we've recently seen a lot of hype around the Steam Deck, but the Steam Deck is more of a computer. It's not just for retro gaming, although, with it having a Linux operating system, you can easily add your most favorite, retro gaming games on there or your AAA titles as well. But me being heavy into retro gaming, and I'm sure many of you, let's look at what his top 5 handhelds are for retro gaming. These are going to be much cheaper and way less capable than the Nintendo Switch and the Valve Steam Deck, but they're still portable. You can take them on a train. You can, they're cheap. So if you break them, they're not a big deal. A lot of them come preloaded with your favorite game. So let's have a look what they say their top 5 are, and then I want to go ahead and share with you my thoughts and some that they missed out on. So here we have some controllers in the background. Would you consider retro? Like, that's a PlayStation 5 controller or 4 controller. How is that retro? I do see some retro controllers on here, though. They're not very expensive, and we will talk about the Raspberry Pi. They have one in here. There are a ton to choose from. So this one would definitely make my top 3. The Anbernic RG351M. For those of you that don't know, there's a RG350. There's a RG350P. There's a RG351. There's a RG280. There's many of these. Usually the RG series are kind of this form factor with the 2 analog sticks on each side of the screen. And then the 3.5 is the 3.5 inch screen. And then the M at the end is the metal version. Love it. Let's look at the stats here. It's going to play everything. Yeah, Nintendo 64, some people would argue not so well. PlayStation 1, it is USB Type-C interface. It doesn't say that here, but it is. It can be Wi-Fi enabled. You can add new games to it. And it does come preloaded. They didn't write this in here probably because they don't want to get sued or whatever. But as they say here, it sells on AliExpress. It sells all over the place, even Amazon and third-party websites. You can actually probably get it close. I want to say closer to like $80 or $90. I'll put a link to banggood.com. You can get it for like $80 or $90 there. And it feels good in your hand. The weight is good. The controls are good. I think it's a little bit of false advertising with Nintendo 64, but Super Nintendo, Genesis, Arcade, it runs it great. And the screen looks great. The screen looks really good for what it is. So the Retroid Pocket 2, you might be wondering, well, what's the difference between the Retroid Pocket 2 and then back at this RG351M? Well, the first thing is the bumper buttons itself. You call it the ZR and R and the ZL and L buttons at the top of the machine. The Retroid Pocket 2 gets us in landslide. Screens, I do hear most people prefer the resolution and everything of the Retroid Pocket 2, so it does win in that category. The one thing, though, that the RG351 has, though, that the Retroid Pocket 2 has, which is you can click in the analog sticks to get R3, L3, and then also the RG351 does have vibration. You can get it to vibrate in games like Nintendo 64, PlayStation, things like that. Most people do prefer the Retroid Pocket 2, that if you go online and look at forums and things, I'm kind of indifferent. It depends on what you're playing exactly. So then Anbernic, this came out, the RG351V came out after the 351M, and basically it's like the 351M, the same kind of circuitry and things like that, if you look at the stats here, right? Same kind of resolution, same memory, same CPU, and then it has the same kind of people like, what the heck, why would I want this on my why would I want this device? And really, I think the main driving thing is just the form factor. It looks like a Game Boy. But in all reality, the 351M is a better setup for the majority of emulation, unless you're playing Game Boy games. Maybe some other games as well, but keep that in mind. And again, it comes preloaded with a ton of games and things like that. Now, the Boy Dmg, I have to go check their website, but I know they sell out all the time. But you could fit a Raspberry Pi 4 in here. And let's see these specs really quick on the Raspberry Pi 4. A 1.5 gigahertz, 4 gigs of RAM. The screen itself is very similar to the other ones in this kind of roundup. I think maybe that was kind of the commonality here. But you will be able to play Nintendo 64 games. You will be able to play PSP and Dreamcast games with no issue with this Raspberry Pi. So as far as performance, this one would win it in a heartbeat. I'm not a super fan of the layout. I have big fingers, and so it really doesn't really suit me very well. Yes, the Pocket Go S30. So I have not laid my hands on this one yet. I mean, you see it. Look at the low end specs here. Very little RAM, so up to PS1. So no Dreamcast, no Nintendo 64. But hey, if you're playing Super Nintendo games, like how cool is that, right? It kind of gives you that. But that's to me, it's very purpose built. I would not put it in my top 5. Okay, so that's what they got here. What else do I have for you? There's many more that this article did not get into. There's a lot of trash ones. Some that have been on the market for years. But I have to agree that for inexpensive, those ones are good. You might be wondering, well, Drew, what's your favorite? Well, in all honesty, my favorite would be to either go with an 8-bit DOE controller with a cell phone, something like this, or an iPega style controller with a cell phone or a tablet. And then I would install something like Launchbox for Android, or just install RetroArch just straight on to your phone, Redream if you're running Dreamcast emulation, and most modern cell phones will beat all of those other systems. You'll still be able to save your games. You'll still be able to. Oh, and GameStar has a really cool telescoping controller like this as well. To me, that's mobile gaming, right? You have no additional devices. You're going to bring your phone with you anyways. They make expandable battery packs now, so you might be wondering, well, I don't want to run the battery. Well, you could just buy a secondary battery, like a 10,000 milliamp battery pack. And then these controllers can be had $50 or less. You could do, the top mount controller or the telescoping style controller. And additionally, if you want to play newer games on the App Store and things like that, you totally can. So I know many of you want this standalone thing, and I would go, as far as price to performance, the Anbernic way or the Retroid Pocket 2 personally. But to each their own. As you see, there's a bunch of reasons why you might go with one versus the other. Thank you, Input, for making this cool little article here. Alejandro, I think, was the author of this one. And that's what I think. Let me know what you all think. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and we'll catch you on the next one.